I felt like a complete idiot trying to quit smoking weed as someone who struggled deeply with a cannabis substance use disorder for a period of 9 years of my life. As an individual who had an undergraduate degree in biology, obtained a doctorate in chiropractic, and was certified in functional medicine, as a serial entrepreneur and business owner, I couldn't fathom that I was struggling to stop smoking weed. And to make matters even worse, I would find myself on Reddit forums and diving deep into YouTube comments, hearing people say things like, weed is only a psychological addiction. You can't become physically dependent to cannabis. You're weak minded. You're weak willed. Cannabis is the best thing in the world. It's helped me quit other drugs. I couldn't fathom the situation that I had found myself in. But upon reflection as to why I struggled so deeply to stop smoking weed, I've identified 7 things that posed a challenge when it came to my quitting journey. And if you're someone who's struggling to stop smoking weed, it helps to understand the challenges that you're facing. Because once you can identify the challenge, you can start to create a path to success. And these 7 things are things that I've identified after working with hundreds, if not thousands of people, business professionals, other high performers, helping them overcome cannabis substance use. I put a link in the video description. We have a protocol, it's brand new. It has a 98% success rate at helping people get sober in as little as 48 hours. So if you like today's video and you relate, be sure to check that out. Reason number one, I struggled to quit smoking cannabis, and this is probably one of the worst side effects of cannabis consumption that I experienced, is because I didn't have a rock bottom moment. I didn't have that strong motivation to stop. I was becoming comfortable performing at 50% of my maximum potential. I was becoming okay with just doing okay. If you look at someone who's addicted to hard drugs like pills or alcohol or other substances like that, so many times you'll hear them talk about they hit a rock bottom, they were consuming it all day long, they're stealing money from family members just to go buy cannabis. And I simply hadn't found myself in that situation. I had a business, I was doing okay. My physical health, until the very end of my cannabis substance use, was regarded as decent, and I just didn't have a primary driving factor to quit. I was successfully dating on and off at the time. My relationships weren't constantly in shambles. I had money, I had the financial means, and up to a point, I even had my physical health. So, that rock bottom motivation that so many people find to make a change when it comes to quitting alcohol or pills or cocaine or other substances simply wasn't there for me. And that was further compounded by the fact that I primarily only consumed cannabis during the evening hours and on weekends. I wasn't someone who was waking up, consuming it all day long, all hours of the day, simply because I couldn't due to my profession. I became content performing at 50% of my actual potential. Life was good enough. And for that reason, I found quitting weed extremely challenging. This is a challenge that I have seen hundreds of high performance individual business professionals face. And it makes it really hard for finding that reason, that why, when it comes to stopping cannabis use. Reason number two is rooted in the physiology of substance use. The fact of the matter is, if you've been consuming cannabis for a long period of time, you're lacking the very neurochemicals that you need to create motivation, to create change. When you consume any drug, including cannabis, for a prolonged period, eventually your brain enters into a state of dopamine deficit. And dopamine isn't just the neurotransmitter that's responsible for making us feel good, but it's the neurotransmitter that's responsible for motivation, for taking action. And if you've been abusing cannabis like I did, especially if there's other substances involved, chances are your dopamine is seriously depleted. You're lacking the very neurochemical that you need to create change, to take action on quitting cannabis. Think of it like this. Imagine the person who weighs 300 pounds who's trying to lose weight. That motivation to go outside and go for a walk, to go to the gym and start working out, it simply isn't there. They're overweight, chances are they're out of breath, and they're experiencing a heck of a lot of joint pain. You need to find something deeper. You need to find something more purposeful to pull that motivation, to pull that initial reason to change out of you. And so many people are lacking that when they first start quitting cannabis. That motivation, it's just not there. It's hard. It makes it really challenging. And this is simply based on your body's physiology. Something else I'll talk about more when I get to one of my other points, the detox process, is the dysregulation that's occurring within your endocannabinoid system. Your body's not making its own cannabinoids, those things that make you feel good day to day. And this makes quitting particularly difficult. Reason number three, I found cannabis so challenging to quit. And I think one of the most underrated things regarding cannabis is the length of the detox process. Remember, cannabis contains THC. THC gets stored in your fat cells. And I've seen people's detoxes take anywhere from 2 weeks all the way up to 120 days before they're clearing THC from their system and the metabolites and the byproducts of THC. I had a client that we were working with. She was in school to become a nurse practitioner, and she had suffered a condition called Cannabinoid Hyperemesis Syndrome, which involves extreme weight loss, malnutrition, body pain, and eventually cyclical vomiting, where you're throwing up 6, 7, 8 times an hour. And she learned about the condition on our YouTube channel, and she eventually enrolled in our one on one coaching programs. It took her 120 days to detox cannabis after complete abstinence from THC, 120 days. When you look at things like nicotine, alcohol, even cocaine, the detox process is extremely fast. And it's really hard for your body and brain to start healing until it completes that initial detox process. This isn't something that's talked about enough when it comes to quitting cannabis. So many of our clients that I work with, one of the things I'll have them do, and this is one of our channel sponsors, but there's a company called Exploro, and they sell this three-tier multi-level THC at-home drug test, okay? So it tests for THC at 20 ng, 50 ng per ml, and 100 ng per ml in your urine. This is a great thing to pick up on Amazon if you're quitting cannabis, because not only does it allow you to track your detox, which can help explain some of the symptoms you might be experiencing as you're quitting, but it's also a great way to create self accountability. Think of it like someone who's trying to lose weight. They weigh themselves on a scale every day or once a week or once every other week. Why not track your THC detox at home to create that same degree of self accountability? When it comes to the THC detox, I think what a lot of people fail to understand, something I certainly didn't understand, was you have to go through the detox process first. After that occurs, or coinciding, you're probably going to experience some withdrawal symptoms, cravings, insomnia, headaches, body pain, nausea, constipation, diarrhea, irritability, frustration, mood swings, fatigue, high levels of energy, low levels of energy. So you go through detox first, then you go through the rewiring of your neural pathways in your brain. That's the withdrawal process. And then we enter the recovery stage. So many people fall short on this. And it's simply because there's a lack of education as to how cannabis works in the body. When you consume THC, you're getting THC, you're getting CBD, and you're getting about 99 other phytocannabinoids, cannabinoids coming from the cannabis plant. Your body has a system called the endocannabinoid system, and it makes its own THC and CBD. If you're consuming a lot of weed, especially if you've been doing it for years, like so many clients that I've worked with in our programs have been, from the age of 15 all the way up to the age of 50, 60 years old, your body stopped making its own endocannabinoids. And those endocannabinoids play a huge role in regulating our mood, our sleep, our appetite, our digestion, our bone growth, our heart health. The list goes on and on. They impact almost every organ system and every function in the body. So when someone quits and they go through the detox and they go through the withdrawal, eventually there has to be a period of time that's dedicated to recovering or restoring the endocannabinoid system to get your body to start making its own endocannabinoids again. And so many people, myself included, fall short on creating a healthy environment for recovery. And this is a major challenge that winds up resulting in not relapse, but a decision to going back to using the substance. Because it's like, I went through the withdrawal, I went through the detox, but I don't feel any better. And then the person chooses to going back to consuming cannabis. Reason number four that I found it so hard to quit consuming cannabis was because of the lack of options, support, and community available for cannabis substance use. When I was quitting, the only thing going, and still today this is largely the case, was Marijuana Anonymous and other similar 12-step programs. Even the rehab facilities out there, inpatient and outpatient programs, don't focus on cannabis substance use. And most rehabs are just the 12-step program with a 30, 60, $90,000 price tag on them a month. And the sad thing is, 12-step programs in the long run only have about a 5 to 10% success rate. And I simply didn't want to be part of a program that made me admit I was powerless over the substance. Because of my understanding of human psychology, I knew that that language was a form of learned helplessness. When you view a problem as permanent, when that problem is pervasive, when it's something that you can't change, you're adopting a mindset of learned helplessness. And that simply didn't make sense to me. I couldn't justify stopping with that support community. I couldn't relate to it. Now, there's another major problem that can result from rehabs and inpatient facilities. I had a family member once, a parent, call us to work with their son in regard to quitting cannabis. And they did what any parent would do. They brought their son to the doctor. The primary care doctor referred him to a psychologist. The psychologist referred them to an inpatient rehab facility. But like I said, this facility did not specialize in cannabis substance use. So this young adult was exposed to people struggling with cocaine and fentanyl addictions and alcoholism. And what wound up happening was they went in with a cannabis substance use disorder and they came out with a narcotic addiction. I've seen it happen more than once. And this is what happens when you have a problem that requires duct tape to fix and you try and fix it with a hammer. It results in really bad outcomes. This is what happens when you're trying to treat a very unique, very specific condition with a blanket approach. Not only could you wind up with a really low success rate, but you could actually wind up going backwards. And that's exactly what happened in the case of this young individual. Now, another major problem with these programs that I ran into, especially as a business owner, someone who had an image in my local community with a private practice, I didn't want to be sitting around groups of people that, quite frankly, I didn't relate to, making a public display of my substance use. People say they don't judge, but people judge, and word travels fast. I've learned that the hard way. Now I'm open to it because my story is out there on YouTube for millions of people to see. Even when I went to obtain my certification as a New York State certified addiction recovery coach, and I would go to these certification meetings, there'd be some chat about like, oh, what were you addicted to? What made you want to get into this profession? And people would say, oh, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, crack. And I was like, I was addicted to nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content. People laughed at me. People thought I was kidding. And then to further compound things, in some of these inpatient facilities and some of these meetings, I just didn't relate to people in it because I wasn't at that rock bottom moment like so many other individuals were. which is why I created the one on one addiction exit protocol specifically for high performers. If you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, a medical professional, an attorney, a real estate professional, maybe you work in high level sales, you're a consultant, you're an investor, you're a physical therapist, dentist, chiropractor. We have a protocol specifically for you that has a 98% success rate at helping people get sober in as little as 48 hours without using willpower, without ongoing meetings, and without a public display of your substance use disorder. We help you quit in real time, in real life, in your current environment without having to uproot your family, your business, your day to day routines. So, if you want to learn more about that protocol, be sure to check out the link in the video description. I developed it because it didn't exist when I was trying to quit. Reason number five, I found quitting cannabis so challenging was because cannabis is getting so much positive attention. The drug is really in the highlight right now. If you go around, you see billboards, you'll get emails, you'll see people talking about it on social media. It's almost blasphemous to talk about cannabis in a bad way. You will get bombarded with people saying, it's God's plant. It's just a plant. Despite the fact that all drugs start with plants, opium, cocaine, tobacco, they all start with plants, but everyone seems to neglect that. Cannabis is so socially accepted right now. It's almost embarrassing to say something bad about it. And you can still even see that today on my YouTube channel. There's always a handful of people attacking me in the comments on my videos, on my posts, just raving about all the wonders that cannabis has done for them. And it may have, but that doesn't mean that there's not negative consequences for other people who might be struggling with a cannabis substance use disorder. This was also very confusing to me when I was trying to quit because I did have friends who were successful who consumed cannabis. I did see celebrities and people that I looked up to, podcast hosts and other entrepreneurs who use cannabis and talk about it positively. And that made quitting all the more complicated for me. Throughout my journey, I would even Google online other high performance individuals who used cannabis. Like I remember that clip of Elon Musk, the one time he smoked weed with Joe Rogan would keep coming up. And I would use that to justify my continued use. Oh, it's not that bad. Everyone's doing it. I might as well keep doing it too. Reason number six, as a high performance individual, I found quitting cannabis challenging was because I had a lot to lose. I was very scared of a physical dependence that I had to it because I knew when I would quit, I couldn't sleep. I knew I couldn't eat. I knew I couldn't function properly. And I was scared. I had a medical practice to run, I had business partnerships to keep up. I had at the time, not that my current relationship with my wife and my kids, but I had a meaningful relationship that eventually did end in a disaster. My substance use resulted in a failed engagement, which worked out for me in the long run, but nonetheless, it was bad at the time. I had so much to lose. And that made making a change all the harder. When you have nothing to lose, when you're at rock bottom, you can only go up. But so many people that I've worked with inside our programs, they have a family. They have the beautiful career. They have the beautiful house. They have a really good life going for them. And there's a lot to lose. And so many programs out there, so many protocols, so many rehabs make it sound like you have to put your whole life on pause and like this process is going to be just an unbearable process. And that's simply not true. But that fear, that false expectation appearing real, that I was going to lose everything, made quitting cannabis particularly challenging. And I've come across this challenge time and time again when I'm working with people inside our one on one coaching protocol. Reason number seven why I found it so hard to quit was because I had polysubstance use, just like so many people who consume cannabis do. I was struggling with a nicotine addiction, a stimulant addiction, a pornography addiction, a cannabis addiction, and I was binge drinking heavily on the weekends and sometimes during the week. I had polysubstance use. So what would happen would be is I would quit cannabis and I'd focus on that, but I wouldn't address any of the other drugs. In fact, many times when I would quit cannabis, I'd say to myself, okay, I'm just going to watch a little more porn, or I'm just going to drink a little heavier this weekend to help me sleep. I'm going to be the guy that consumes nicotine, but I'm not going to touch cannabis. I'll quit vaping, I'll start chewing tobacco. I'll stop chewing tobacco, I'll start vaping. Screw it, I'll just use nicotine gum and snooze pouches. One substance to the next substance to the next substance. You have to remember you're quitting cannabis with the intention of feeling better. And if you don't actively create an environment to foster feeling better, you're not going to attain that expected outcome. And when we fall short of our expectations that we have in quitting the drug, we tend to wind up making the decision to return to the consumption of that drug. So many things out there fall short on addressing polysubstance use and all the other drugs that someone might be using, even though cannabis is at the root of it. I would smoke a bunch of weed, I'd get that weed hangover, I would need Monster energy drinks, Red Bulls, and pre workouts to wake me up the next day. Then I would sustain all day long on nicotine. Then I would come home and I'd want to unwind, so I'd smoke cannabis or I'd binge drink, and then I couldn't sleep unless I watched pornography. And this was my life for 9 years, day in and day out. And no one was specifically addressing my unique situation. I could find help with alcohol. I could find help if I had a fentanyl addiction, but I couldn't find help with that little series or subset of substance use disorders and habit loops that I had. And that's why I'm so passionate about our addiction exit protocol and what I do for people these days. The other thing that I think so many people fail to realize with polysubstance use is there's a very specific way you have to come off of these substances, especially if you are running a family, you're a stay-at-home mom, and you got three kids running around. You're a working woman, a working parent, and you have a business. You are a medical professional, you're an attorney, you're working with clients all day long. We can't just stop everything. In many cases, we have to taper as to not disrupt that person's day-to-day life too dramatically. Because if there's too much disruption in the quitting process, it's going to lead to feelings of overwhelm. It's going to lead to really intense withdrawal and potentially a decision, not a relapse, a conscious choice, a rational choice to going back to consuming that substance. And I've seen time and time again, someone goes to 12 step or they go to some other thing and they say, okay, get off everything, including your medications, your antidepressants, your psychiatric medications. And this cost people everything. Someone starts off trying to do something good for themselves and they wind up getting a worse outcome than the place that they started in. And I don't want to see that happen to you. If you can relate to any of these 7 reasons, it probably means that you're really struggling to quit consuming cannabis. And if that's the case, I want you to follow me right into the next video where I talk a little bit more about cannabis detox and cannabis withdrawal, because chances are that's the first challenge you're going to face when you quit. So I'll see you in that next video. Until next time.